And many of you know I'm headed over to Germany to meet the man who saved my wife's life twice this week. You can follow that story on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and right here at WNST and anywhere we do it. The Orioles taking on the Blue Jays at Camden Yards all week. Luke is on the scene there. And we will finally have the fourth and most hideous preseason game. That's kind of interesting because they're all kind of hideous in their own special way in New Orleans on Thursday night. Here to talk all things sports. It's been a couple of months since I've had one of my favorite guests on, one of my defending champions around here, despite the fact that at one point he worked at the Baltimore Sun. He is now at Sporting News as a writer and a co-author, Silent Jester with Tommy Smith. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at David_C_Steele. That's Steele with an E, like George the Animal. We welcome David Steele, our defending champion, back on. That's a pretty good introduction for you, man. I think I did a pretty good job with that.
That's a great introduction. I could not be more flattered by that. I don't know if I deserve it all, but I'll accept it.
You know what, man? I love having you on because you're one of the dudes that has taken the race thing straight on in a very unique way in your writing over the last couple of decades and taking on topics that other writers don't particularly care for too much. And I tell you what, anytime we have an athlete, you have Ali out on the front of your Twitter, you have Tommy Smith out on the front of your Twitter and have written, I mean, protesting you, while you're not a protester, you are one who chronicles protests. And this Kaepernick thing is a fascinating debate, I think, for all of us as we are potentially 10 weeks out on electing Donald Trump to lead the free world.
How about that? You know, his name comes up so many times in this past year whenever these topics come up. We've mentioned it a bunch of times when we've discussed these topics, and it inevitably comes up. You know, this is the direction that this country's going, and we're confronting things that even in our lifetime, where we've seen the amount of conflict and the amount of change that's happened during the course of our lives, we're confronting stuff during the course of this past 12 months and going forward into the next 3 or 4 months as we approach Election Day that we have not. This is stuff that our parents, grandparents, and people going back several generations have had to deal with it. Now it's laid down right in our laps, and we're dealing with it in one way or the other, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's on now.
And in the era of the internet, they don't need journalists like you or I. Anybody can make a protest on their own Twitter if they're a big enough deal, right? And anyone can run for president on Twitter if they're a big enough deal and they can find enough people to subscribe and promote whatever ideology they have. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, right, left, rich, poor, terrorist or not, right? I remember 10 years ago when, like, How to Make a Bomb came out on the internet. We were all kind of weirded out by that. The stuff I see now is kind of crazy. And I really give extra points to anyone, even to Donald Trump, who I have very little respect for, zero respect for. At this point, at any point, if you are taking a stand, whether you're Donald Trump or you're Colin Kaepernick or you're Bruce Jenner or whatever his or her name may be this week, right? Or whether you're Bruce Springsteen and you're canceling concerts, or whether you're the NBA and saying, we're going to move our All-Star game out of your city. Whatever the stand is, I have to respect it at this point because there will be a long, long line of people for or against you, no matter which side of whatever loud platform you decide to take.
The technology that's available now changes everything because you can connect directly to everybody. They can connect directly to you, and the people who you were connecting to can come along and become powerful voices in themselves. And it's interesting because that's made you and I have to change the way that we do our jobs and the way that we reach people, and some do it better than others. But yeah, you get a pulse and you get a feel instantaneously for everything that's going on. And like with everything that's going on with Colin Kaepernick these last few days, you do not have to wait around for tomorrow's paper or the morning news shows or the afternoon radio shows to find out what everybody's thinking, how they feel, and how much a story can change in the span of not even 24 hours, in the span of 1 hour, in the span of 15 minutes. And it really is fascinating to follow, and it can really change and shape a story, and it can drive people to do the things that they feel they need to do to make the change that they want to make.
All right, so specifically, we got David Steele on the line from Sporting News, one of our favorite guests here. On the Kaepernick thing, let's start with that because I got a million things I want to talk to you about this week, including Harbaugh's tirade on preseason football, which we can get to. But Kaepernick's fascinating because, let's be honest, his career's not trending in the right direction as a player, okay? So it may have been different had he won the Super Bowl and had they gotten that yard and had I not written Purple Rain 2 and we had not had a parade. That came incredibly close to happening. I mean, he came as close to being a Super Bowl winning quarterback, as anybody this side of Steve McNair, right, in the modern era, right? Or maybe also out in Seattle with Russell Wilson coming, one deflected interception away from winning a Super Bowl. So I would just say this. With Kaepernick, it's different because of his perceived limitations as a quarterback in taking this stance. It's not Tom Brady at this point, who's also been maligned by his own league and has not been, despite the color of his skin, impervious to any pain being inflicted upon him. But Kaepernick's made a lot of money. He's had a very, very different upbringing than many of us have in many ways. I'm a child of a Latin parent brought up by two very old white people in Dundalk, So I was adopted. I'm familiar with all that. But Kaepernick doing this has created everyone to take aside an issue without maybe fully understanding his story. So I want to hear his story, and then I'll work it out as to why and how it gets to this point.
Yeah, and you make a great point in recognizing that everybody's story is not the same. I mean, we talked about the presidential candidate that we talked about, and his stock in trade is widespread generalization, stereotyping, branding entire groups of people, nationalities, ethnicities, races, sexes, all in one big group and saying things about them. It's something that a lot of people do. Not many people with the power that he does it the way that, is able to do it the way he does and reach the audiences. You don't hear how things affect certain individuals a certain way. And it's easy to jump to conclusions and make assumptions. I wasn't raised the way you were. You weren't raised the way Colin Kaepernick was. He wasn't raised the way, you could pick any player.
Adrian Peterson and beating his child, right? I mean,
yes,
there was a
absolutely.
huge segment of the world that I didn't understand and said, yeah, you beat your kids. It's what you're supposed to do. And to a certain part of the population, that's cool. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because we bounce these things around about quarterbacks all the time. And, Russell Wilson was not raised the same way Cam Newton was, different part of the country, different parents, different occupations, different paths, period. You could literally take any group of 5 big-time quarterbacks who have gone to the top and made it to the Super Bowl and, compare them and say their lives, have amazing differences, but also amazing similarities. Who knows how kind of similarities there are between the way Colin Kaepernick was raised and the way Tom Brady was raised. They might be pretty much the same. I mean, it's funny to think when you look at both of them, they were both raised by 2 white parents in middle-class houses. And clearly Tom Brady and Colin Kaepernick don't have the same experiences, but there's some things that they could probably share with each other. Just like Kaepernick could share same things with Russell Wilson, he could share things with Michael Vick, and Michael Vick could share things with, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's fascinating, but he's the one who's in the spotlight. And it's funny, you mentioned the Super Bowl. If he had made that yard, his life story might be different. And somebody on the Ravens for the losing team.
Oh, no doubt. Joe Flacco would no longer be a Super Bowl MVP, right? I mean, literally, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that changes his.
And John Harbaugh wouldn't have a ring, and his brother would, right?
Mm-hmm. His brother would be the one.
I mean, there would be a lot of lives changed there on that. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you can't automatically say, well, this guy is not quote unquote qualified to talk about this. He should not discuss this. He should not be the person we should be listening to. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a viewpoint, and everybody has a perspective on the life that they had and the people that they were surrounded with.
So then what does the NFL do about it? I mean, in the big picture, what does the employer, what does the league do about it? What would the Players Association say? Is this the first of a trend, or will Kaepernick be the only one? I remember when I was the only one criticizing the owner of the Orioles. I thought it was going to become a trend, but little did I know they all wanted to leave the Sun and go work for him. But in the case of Kaepernick, it's black, it's white, it's America, it's, not America. It's different factions of society. Everybody's an NFL fan to some degree, so this is front page news. But he has his reasons, and I would say in a free society, he is showing the one thing a guy like him would have left, which is, this is how I really feel. And so I do respect his ability to do that. Then pundits like you and I and the general public will then pass judgment on that.
Yeah, that's what we do, and that's how we, exercise our voices and how we. Interesting position because initially the league and the 49ers, took the path that said he has that right. We are not enacting any policy that's trying to suppress anybody's opinion, anyone's free speech, even if it's something within the context of the government, the military, because a lot of people have made the connection to the military, even though we both know we could probably call somebody tonight and find a veteran who has put their lives on the line and says, yes, this is exactly why we put our lives on the line, so somebody will have the right to protest what's wrong in this country the way they're not allowed to in other countries. So you can't stereotype and group all of them together either, and let's be very clear about that. But the NFL has handled this so far in a very smart way. They still do have extremely tight ties with the military, with the armed forces. This is the image that they have,
and a financial arrangement that has gone long unreported, right? I mean, that embarrassed Steve Bisciotti and the Ravens. They were getting, was it $750,000? I think was the number I saw.
Yes, they were somewhere in that neighborhood, around $750,000 of a total budget for the league, more than $5 million of basically being a commercial for the armed forces. All of those reunions, those were all something that were paid for by the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I don't want to say that's for another day because we certainly have the forum. David Steele is here. He is David_C_Steele out at Sporting News and formerly of many newspapers, including the Baltimore Sun, and talking about Kaepernick. On to another NFL topic here. And I know you might be writing more about the Kaepernick thing, especially with Black Lives Matter and any other movement, the Donald Trump movement, whatever the movements that are out there. Sports is going to be a part of that, right? I don't think there's any doubt. Ben Roethlisberger's been dragged into the Trump side of things. Tom Brady got dragged. We haven't heard the last of this. Springsteen will be involved, and Pearl Jam. Everybody, Barbra Streisand got involved. Everybody's going to get involved before the first week of November. I'm pretty sure of that. But that being said, on the NFL side, this week we've seen heinous injuries, right? Romo, obviously what happened with Ben Watson the other night. And the question keeps coming up every year, not only about the value of the preseason from a schmuck like me that buys tickets and has PSLs, but what's the real value for a 36-year-old football player that has potentially his career ended now in these preseason games? And a guy like John Harbaugh finally being a guy who would speak out and say, I don't know that these preseason games are really good for anybody.
Yeah, how about, I give him all the credit in the world because every coach in the league, I'm certain, feels the way that he does, and he's the one who actually stepped out there and said it. And yes, he did it after one of his players got injured, somebody he was counting on, but every coach in this league has had to go through that, and they have had to make decisions, more so this preseason than any other time. I was at the game in Washington last weekend when the Bills played, where Rex Ryan kept a bunch of his starters out of the game. The week before, Jay Gruden didn't play Kirk Cousins. Aaron Rodgers didn't play.
Well, beyond that, David, it's not good business. It's bad business, bad football, bad everything when Tony Romo gets hurt. There's nothing worse than the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. The difference between the tickets being $198 when the Ravens get there in November or being $29 on a Living Social deal, which is what it's going to be if they're 3-8 when the Ravens show up there the week before Thanksgiving.
There you go. No, exactly, and that's the thing you have to debate because football is their business. They want to give the fans the best product they possibly can. Why would you waste in games that don't mean anything? Why is there not a better way to pick the team, evaluate the team, get the team all the work it can get, and then focus on the 16 games that decide whether you're going to be a champion or not? That's the dilemma that every coach in the NFL has, including and first of all, John Harbaugh. I mean, people's jobs are on the line. How can Jason Garrett sleep the rest of this year if he knows that they could go 4-12 again if they don't have Tony Romo around? He's out on the street unless Dak Prescott, turns into Cam Newton or
Tom Brady or something like that. Right? Sure.
Or Tom Brady, exactly. And you know what? I'm glad you said that because I'm against comparing all players strictly by race. So I'm glad you compared him to Tom Brady. That's another topic entirely. Well, but no, I mean, coaches lose jobs, players lose jobs because of games that don't mean anything, but the NFL is charging full price for, and the teams feel obligated to play these players because the games are on the schedule. And for a head coach to step out and say, this is a bad idea, we need to rethink this. So many people are saying it. The coaches might be the people that the NFL actually listens to. If a couple more get on board, or even better than that, more than half, majority, join in with Don Harbaugh and say, we're behind you on this. Take this decision out of our hands. Protect us from ourselves, protect our franchises from ourselves, and do something about this problem that we have. Don't let us do this, then something might happen.
David C. Steele joins us here for Sporting News. You can follow his journey out on Twitter, David_C_Steele, just like George the Animal Steele with an E. And my friend from the Baltimore Sundays and still doing it. Now that the NFL gets going here, the Harbaugh outspokenness, this goes back to last March at the owners' meetings when he went on a tirade about rules and about cut blocks and about protecting players. He has become, quite frankly, sort of the anti-Belichick. I mean, and it's not like John does not look forward to meeting with the media much, to be honest with you. But he has now been off the record with a bunch of us at different points. I think he's created some relationships with people like me and other reporters out there from Philadelphia and elsewhere as being a guy who will, when the door shuts, he'll be glad to tell you the world, according to John Harbaugh. And part of that is, in a lot of ways, lost upon the league. And I hear that from coaches again and again, that the business gets in the way of the football. And the football coaches are starting to some degree, get a little chippy about that.
They are, yeah, absolutely. A lot of times that they actually pays it. They're the ones who are most directly connected to the players. I mean, if you just take the example of John Harbaugh in that last game with Benjamin Watson, he was the guy out in front of the cameras, the first one that everybody spoke to, who got a chance to speak about what it meant for a guy like Ben Watson, whose importance to this team and his importance as a person, somebody who he knew on a personal level, what it meant to see him go through that. And you can't be detached from that reality when you're talking about football. And if the coaches are the ones who attach that level of humanity and that level of importance to the game and make the people who are all about the business side of it pay attention to it, then that's going to make the game better. And if we've learned nothing else about John Harbaugh and a lot of other coaches in the league, when you really get a chance to talk to them, that's something they really care about. That's something that I think they want to have more influence on.
And then, of course, the first preseason game gets wiped out because they can't get the lines right on the field in Canton, Ohio, right? I mean, the entire year began with a pretty royal embarrassment for the NFL, huh?
Yeah, you know what, and it's I don't think that should ever be forgotten or swept under the rug or pushed aside or shrugged off. Everybody's eyes are on that, and that's going to be the tricky thing about it, because people, are dying for these starts of these football because it's the end of it's the end of the off-season drought. They're seeing football again for the first time. People want to see a game, no matter how early it is or how it may be dangerous or damaging to the players. So there is that reality that you want to do want to serve the fans. But the people who are actually involved in the game, the players and the coaches, they're the ones who in that position, they were in danger. They had to step up. They had to speak out, and they had to call the league out, basically, in front of everybody and say, how can you make us play in these conditions? Why would you do that? And I think people should not be allowed to forget about that. I mean, you look at what's going on throughout this entire preseason. you could bring it back to that and say that's really where it started. We should have known that this was going to be the tone that was set based on what happened in that very, very first game. And if the NFL could not get it right, are we sure we can trust it to continue to do it? They need to start listening to people who know what's going on and have the players and the game's best interest at heart.
And then the Orioles are playing, David. And I know you've been in the vicinity, in the neighborhood, and keeping a close eye on these Nationals-Orioles matchups over the last week. Any thoughts about the Orioles? I mean, do you think they're going to play a playoff game this year?
I still think they will. It's hard to. It sounds crazy based on some of these results lately, and it's kind of strange because they sure did look good against the Nationals, who are clearly legit and who are going to go to the playoffs and probably have more little tweaks to do than really any major overhaul.
But probably not going to have any real success once they get there. I mean, they're the Nationals,
once they get
right?
there, no, that's a different story because we know what else is waiting for them in the National League. That's all you said. But their position seems to be set. I mean, and there's a lot to be said about being in the right division, and we can say that about pretty much every sport. But that helps a lot. But the Orioles, it seemed like that was such a good omen the way they played in those sets in up in Camden Yards and then down in Nats Park, and then they just sort of reverted back to what was going on. They couldn't hit, couldn't count on the starting pitching. I mean, the two pretty important things that you want to have as a foundation of a playoff team. It's you don't understand logically. You can't understand why those things just disappear the way they did. You think the pitching is going to come back around, but it's hard to trust it at this point because it really, in a sense, has been such a long time since you have been able to rely on the hitting the way that you've been accustomed to the last.
Well, I know I don't trust the pitching, bro. You know what I mean? Let's start with that. I mean, you look up and the biggest games of the year, you're throwing Wade Miley, Ubaldo Jimenez, and Giovanni Gallardo. These are the biggest games of the year, and this is what you've got to offer. I mean, if we wake up next week and they're 6.5 games out, they've kind of made that bed, quite frankly, unless they're willing to score 10 or 12 runs every night.
No, you're right, and that's the thing. And you look back, it's like, did you not see this coming beginning of the year? Did you not see this coming at the trade deadline? Did you not see this coming as, the final waiver deadline approached? I mean, it's, the windows have been there. Other teams have made moves. Other players have been available. What did you guys do to shore up this team? This is a contender. You know that when it's at its best, it can go a long way. You know what its weaknesses are. Why is the starting pitching looking this way? Why are you looking up and seeing Wade Miley and Ubaldo Jimenez starting games in August? How did you allow that to happen? But you've been around this team. You've watched them. You've had to deal with them and confront them face to face. When they've had the nerve to do it. They let everybody down. They let them win. The window was open for them, and they let it slam shut on them. And if they do get to the end of the year, or they get to say mid-September, and they are out of the race, who are they going to have to point fingers at? After a while, you start pointing fingers, and you have to point them all back at yourself.
With this mess that's here with Duquette and Angelos, I mean, I've gotten in an argument with Alan earlier in the week about this. Blaming Duquette. I can't just blame Duquette because I know how active Mr. Angelos is behind the scenes. This isn't Dan Duquette's team, and he had every hand and every decision. It's not that way. I mean, it's the Bill Parcells thing. Who picks the ingredients? Who does the grocery shopping? Dan Duquette's not really the one doing the grocery shopping here.
No, and I made I made a point not to name him by name because I know, and you know, and a whole lot of people who know this game know that he's a good baseball man when he's allowed to do his job. And you know who makes decisions in this organization. You know who has the final say.
But it's never pointed out. It really isn't. It isn't pointed out the way it would be pointed out if this were Boston or New York and we had a bunch of pit bulls in the media here. You know that, David. I mean, when's the last time Angelos was spoken of or spoken to by anyone in regard to anything? And the notion is that he's not involved. Well, that's the, maybe Dan Duquette didn't want Chris Davis, right? Maybe he didn't.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's, you can't look at anything with this organization without looking at it through that prism. You just can't. You're deluding yourself if you do. And I don't. I mean, this team had, thankfully, after all those terrible years, has finally raised the bar expectations to where today this team does in fact have the ability to contend, to go to a World Series, to win a championship for the city finally, to do what the Ravens have been doing for a decade and a half. And you can't let an opportunity like that go by. You can't all of a sudden slam on the brakes when you finally, after putting the city through so much over that horrible, horrible span, as you finally made the improvements and the leaps that you've made after bringing in Buck Showalter, doing all the things you do, and finally making deals that actually build this team and build this minor league system, and to not make the moves and make the changes that you need to put it over the top. You see, you can see the end of the road finally from when you're standing, and you're not doing the things that you need to do to get there.
Yeah, the best you're going to do is Wade Miley at this point. David, man, keep writing out there. I know you're getting ready for football season. It's our favorite time of the year. I know we're a little Labor Day here, a little lull, and then things are going to get really interesting as we get basketball and hockey cranked up, college football, the NFL, and, of course, the baseball postseason. Always great having you on, man, and keep up the great work. We'll be following you out on Twitter, bro.
Very, very much for having me again, and you guys enjoy your trip and keep doing what you do.
That's the plan, at least so far here in America. We'll see if Colin Kaepernick sitting out the national anthem has any grave effects on us. People ask me, what do you think? I don't have some outrage for it. To me, it's not unprecedented, and it's individual, and it's America, and God bless him is what I say. You can find me out in the Bio Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, any breaking news around the Orioles 40-man, certainly Ravens cuts coming early this week and again late this week, all on the WNST text service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard and Dennis Colossus. Our dear friend will be here driving you home from Thursday from 3 until 5. I will be in Germany the next couple of days. I'm actually going to be doing some radio from Germany as well. We might even fire up the old Facebook Live if we get a chance. You can find me and follow my wife's journey and our journey and the journey of our incredible donor. It's going to be quite the week in Germany. Out on our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, heck, anywhere social media is served. Any complaints, any criticism, any rocks to be thrown or tomatoes to be had, nasty@WNST.net reaches me. And yes, like Mr. Angelos, I am a very available individual. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST's house in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.